use this recording uh, in other settings. Okay, we just wanted to let you know. And also, the chat function has been disabled for this meeting. So when the timing comes, you will be able to ask your questions in by raising your hand and opening your and starting your microphone. And so just to let you all know about that, we're very happy to have you here. I know that we have participants from all over the world. Maybe you can, I don't know if we can allow participants to rename themselves. I think we do. But if you want, you can just rename yourself and put the city where you're at. I'm in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. And it's a pleasure to welcome you all to this meeting. Oh, wonderful. So I see, so Sabrina is from Toulon in France. I see that she changed. I will change my settings as well. Um, and so, as you know, we have a great morning ahead of us, and we are so happy to have all of you here. It's morning where I am, actually, but of course, it can be afternoon or evening or in the middle of the night, wherever you are. And we're so happy you're making this effort to be here. Um, Michelle, do you think that you could share the agenda slide with us? Yes, please.
Yes, will do.
Okay, thank you. Um, we also wanted to say that we do have interpreting in this meeting. So if you're here and you would like to tune into the interpreting channel, we have interpreting into Portuguese, into Spanish, and into Russian. And so you can just click on the globe and you will be able to find and listen to the channel that you are most comfortable with. Okay? All of our speakers and myself will be speaking English in English. And so you can tune into the interpretation if you would like. So this is our agenda for today. I want to now in the beginning just to uh, talk to you a bit about the history of the school's directory and how AIIC got started in the first place with in our work regarding interpreter training. And then we're going to hear from our wonderful panel members, as you can see here, about the different criteria that we have for interpreter training and why they are so important. We will also have a Q&A. And at the end of the Q&A, I will also show you and give you access to some links about the school's directory, which is this effort that we have to showcase the interpreting programs that we believe meet the criteria that we consider to be the most important criteria for interpreter training. And so you will have access to that link. You will have access to other resources that we have on the AIIC website regarding, for example, internships, which is one of the topics for today that Jillian Meissner will talk about, why interpreting practice should be unpaid. You also have a complimentary resource about that on the AIIC website. Okay, so let me just first launch this poll because I wanted to know more about you. So I know that this question, "Who are you?" is very generic, and it can be very existential. Or, but if you can tell us what would best suit you in these options that we have, just so that we know more about those who are here with us at the meeting. Great. So we have almost 50 people have answered. Excellent. We have interpreting students with us. Yay. And interpreter trainers. Excellent. And also fellow colleagues who are conference interpreters. Excellent. So almost everyone has answered. Thank you so much. And so I wanted to name that category none of the above, actually something like curious or so happy to to be here and learn more. But we're all here to learn more, actually. But of course, it's good to know um, a bit of the background, and it also gives us, as those who will be speaking and the panel members, more of an idea of our audience. So we're almost done. Yes. Okay. Anyone else answering? Going once, going twice. Okay. So I think that let me share the results with you. You can see the results, right? Yes? Wonderful. Okay. So we have about 45% of you are uh, conference interpreter trainers, conference interpreters, and also interpreter trainers. Excellent. We have 12% interpreting students and 37% who are professional conference interpreters. So glad to have you here. And thank you to those 6% who are none of the above and are here with us. We all hope that you'll learn a lot, that you'll be maybe learn different things and expand your knowledge about interpreter training in general. Thank you so much. So I will stop sharing this poll right now. Okay. And so, just to give you a brief history of interpreter, of the role that AIC has had in this, in the scenario of interpreter training. I will also share with you in the end the name of an article that Danica Seleskovich wrote about the history of what was known in the beginning as AIC's school policy. And so at this time, when when the the school policy started, the idea was that AIC wanted to AIC wanted to be able to show the programs that they considered to be the best training programs to train interpreters. And why did AIC want to do that? Well, because as the International Conference Interpreters Association, we had the knowledge of what it took to train interpreters at the time. And so in the beginning of this effort, only 4 schools were part of this list that received the recognition of AIC, which was Geneva, Heidelberg, Sorbonne, and Paris HEC, HEC. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this was in 1963. So this is when all of this started. This idea of accrediting schools that would abide by the criteria that were established by the association as crucial to train interpreters. Um, and then in another academic article, Jennifer McIntosh also pointed out that during all these years, since 1963, interpreting programs started to improve and to also be aware that they should abide by these criteria so that AIC could recognize their role in interpreter training. Um, and these criteria have been discussed for many, many years. And then starting in the late 2000s, or actually after the early 2000s, we stopped publishing a list of schools that we actually approved. But the idea was with AIC training and professional development was that we would publish a list of schools that would at least abide by what we consider to be the eliminatory criteria or the essential criteria for interpreter training. And as you hear our panel members speaking today, you will realize that these criteria, they can be in a way somewhat broad or maybe not as specific as you would think, but we need to consider that these are what we consider to be eliminatory criteria for all sorts of interpreter training programs in different regions of the world with different resources even, right? This is not a wish list or a dream list, but this is what we consider to be these essential criteria for interpreter training. So what are they? Now we are going to hear from our panel. And we also wanted to know that we had an intentional perspective in choosing our panel members. These are very well known trainers, but not only trainers, not only broadly trainers, but they all received their training at the University of Geneva in their interpreter trainers program. And so we wanted you to learn from them about these eliminatory criteria. So let's get started. I think I'm already speaking too much. Michelle, can you please show us this slide again with our agenda for today? Again, I know that we have more people. Wow, 92 people in the room. This is fantastic. Thank you guys so much for coming. So, these are our topics as we see. We're going to be hearing about the importance of aptitude testing with Killian Sieber, why trainers should be professional interpreters with Jibola Sofalahan, how long the course should be with Amanda Forsyth, um, the importance of having a postgraduate level qualification with Maha El Metwali, training in consecutive and simultaneous, and why that is important with Mina Soares Andrade. And Jillian Meissner will talk about why interpreting practice should be unpaid. So you'll be hearing from our panel members for about 7 minutes each. And after they're done, we're going to open the floor for questions. So please write your questions if you have them during the time, and you will be able to ask directly to a panel member or just ask a broad question to all of them. Okay? So, Killian, you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Denise, for giving me the floor, and thank you for the invitation. Thanks to AIIC, I'm going to be breaking the ice and address the issue of the importance of the aptitude tests that schools have to have in order to be put on the list. But before I do, perhaps a few words on the role of interpreter training programs, interpreter schools, as they were often called. The role of those programs, ever since the institutions themselves stopped training conference interpreters, has been one of producing what is often referred to as ready to deploy or booth ready interpreters. What does that mean? That means that on the one hand, there is a private market where there are no more fail safes. And once you have a diploma from a school, you are let loose in the wild and you work. The institutions still have that filter because the EU, with the parliament and the court and the commission, they organize a joint test. As well as the United Nations, they have their own test, and other specialized organizations such as the EPO, they have their own program to test interpreters in, even though it's not quite a test as such. But basically, the role has shifted because no longer do many organizations or the market itself provide this final mile where they would take the interpreters and make sure that they are ready to work. Today, interpreters have to hit the ground running, not just jogging, let alone walking. So time is of the essence. And the apprenticeship model, which is one that I suspect many people are familiar with, basically meaning that you imitate the master, whilst being a model that has been tested and tried, has proven to be relatively slow. You mentioned Danica Seleskovich. She was famously the person who said the interpreter has to practice until the so-called the click, which means until the penny drops. The problem is the penny might not drop by the time the program is done. So what needs to happen is you need to work on efficiency and effectiveness, and that has been put into practice in many schools by looking beyond the task and looking at the skill. And that brings me to the aptitude testing, because the endpoint of the training programs is relatively clear. The endpoint is one of producing booth-ready interpreters, and there the benchmark is perhaps a little less clear-cut than the private market, but definitely so when it comes to the institution because they have standardized tests. Now, what is not clear, so that's the external factor. The internally set factor is the starting point. And that means that schools, depending on how they're set up, depending on their duration, we'll hear about the duration of programs a little later on, depending on what they pack into their program, have to establish what their candidates need to have in terms of aptitude so as to make sure that these candidates can thrive in their particular program and eventually ensure that most, ideally all, but let's say most people who sign on to a training program actually graduate. So, what is it those schools should be looking for? They're looking for two things. On the one hand, they're looking for what academics would call procedural knowledge, and on the other hand, declarative knowledge. So, declarative knowledge is the what we know, and procedural knowledge is the how we know how to do things. And there's a bit of both in these aptitude tests, and that's important to remember. The bulk of it is, however, focused on the skills, the how to, because those take longer to integrate than the acquisition of simple knowledge, which we all do if we learn something by rote, if we memorize word lists. That is something that requires relatively little skill. It's a bit like with a bike. You might be able to understand and memorize all the parts of a bike, but that's a far cry from knowing how to ride it. So, um, these skills need not be present in uh, potential candidates, but they should be budding. Depending on the program you run, you might realize, and this is something schools do, they look at what they are able to convey in a particular time frame, and they know that certain things they won't have the time to train. I'm a firm believer that almost anything can be trained, but it's a matter of time. So if I run a relatively short and intensive program, I will not have the time to train everything, meaning that I need to set the bar a little higher and have certain expectations. Then there is obviously the language factor. Language comprises both a declarative part and a procedural part. I might know lots of terms, but I might not know how to use those terms adequately. The declarative knowledge part there definitely is essential. It's a bit like wanting to teach somebody how to build a wall, but you don't give them enough bricks. They will never be able to build a wall that stands straight if they don't have the right number and amount of bricks and the mortar that goes in between. So basically, the criterion of having this aptitude test, and the aptitude test will change from program to program because not no two programs are alike. They focus on different markets, they offer different languages, they offer different content, they have different durations, and depending on that, what takes them to get from A to B will be different. B we set, the A, the schools set. And that is why admission exams or proficiency, sorry, or aptitude exams are not the same across the board. What we in schools try to do is reduce frustration and failure rate, frustration on the side of both the trainers and the students by admitting students of whom we think they do not have the aptitude to thrive in our program. But that doesn't mean that they may not do really well in a different program that has different parameters. And obviously also reduce frustration for the trainers, because it is frustrating to be working with somebody who was not given or who doesn't come with the necessary bricks to build that wall.
Thank you so much, Killian. Yes, and it's wonderful for us to get started with that in mind. What we need to build that wall. Love that metaphor. Thank you so much. So now our next speaker is Um, just a minute. Sorry, I have about 400 different slides open in my notes. Just a minute. Our next speaker is Jibola Sofalahan, who will talk about why trainers should be professional interpreters. Jibola, thank you so much. And as Jibola gets to the screen, you will see her bio. We wanted to use our time for you to ask questions, and so that's why we're flashing the trainers' bios as they come. Thank you, Jibola.
Thank you, Denise. I have been asked to answer the question, why trainers should be professional interpreters. The short answer to that question is that you can't give what you don't have. We all know that knowledge and skills are always transferred from the teacher who has the knowledge or the skill to the student. And that applies in all professions, whether you're talking about medicine or others, or academics. In the trades, you could be talking about carpentry, or even in learning life skills, swimming, for example, which means that the teacher already has the skill or the knowledge that they want to transfer. So if this is a known fact, then the question is, why are we even talking about this? Why is this not a given in interpreter training? I have identified a couple of reasons as to why. The first one is this widespread misconception about what interpreting is about. There's a tendency to assume that interpreting is about language proficiency alone. In other words, you know the languages so you can interpret. But we all know that interpreting is much more than that. The second reason is that typically interpreter training happens at universities. In other words, in an academic setting. And quite often they're actually lodged in the modern languages department. So given the academic setting, the assumption is that what is required to train a master's or a postgraduate student is a doctorate. However, it's important to realize that interpreter training is not language learning. The languages should have been in place before you come into training. It is not an academic course either. You could say that a master's in conference interpreting is a professional or a professional master's degree. In other words, the focus is more on preparing students for a career in conference interpreting with emphasis on practical skills and knowledge than on research and theory, which is not to say they don't have their place, research and theory, but it's more about practical skills and knowledge. Now, I identified some of the consequences of training that has been given by non-professionals. One consequence is that the focus is often on theory and on semantics, with little or no practical training. And even when practical training is introduced, it is often based on what the trainer or the lecturer imagines interpreting to be. For example, in training for consecutive interpreting, they're going to focus on note-taking and symbols with little or no consideration for all those soft skills that have been layered upon one another to get to the point of note-taking. The end result of this is that such training programs graduate students who are unemployable for the simple reason that they are not fit for purpose, which of course it's a tragedy. Now, interpreter training, as we know, is a process of skill acquisition. And this is the reason why professionals, those who are practicing the profession, are best suited for it. However, let me add that to be a trainer, an interpreter is best equipped for it after training as an interpreter trainer. That is where they learn the pedagogy of interpreting. This is what best equips the interpreter, the professional interpreter to be a trainer. There are many opportunities for this, and anybody wishing to be a trainer should explore them. There are many benefits to training given by professionals, those who are practicing the trade, but I'll just mention a few of them. There's the obvious ability to transfer the skills and soft skills because they themselves have learned them and they apply it to their work. But beyond that, there is the ability for the professional to give life and context to training by demonstrating what they're training in class, standing before the students and giving a consecutive or doing a simultaneous, or by organizing mock conferences that simulate real life because they know what they look like. And where possible, by getting them to attend real life conferences where they can even try their hands at dummy booths. One important reason for professionals to be the trainers is because of the influence they can have on curriculum design and syllabus planning based on market realities, also based on evolutions in the profession. We see this every day, and I'm thinking particularly of modules on modules on technology, IT, where it is advisable, it is helpful when IT is tailored to interpreters, to those elements that they need to exercise their trade. I'm also thinking of the module on professional practice. If you're not practicing it, it's difficult for you to teach on the ethics and standards of the profession. So let me conclude by saying that it is not for nothing that interpreter trainers like to be described as trainers rather than as lecturers. What we do as trainers is to serve as a bridge between future interpreters, our students, and the marketplace, because we equip them to meet the needs of clients. We are active in the profession, and that places us in a unique position to do this effectively and successfully. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jabala. Exactly, exactly. Well, I love these criteria. I'm always biased when I hear people explaining them because that's exactly it. And as you said, as professional trainers, um, we are as professional interpreters, we can influence training in the right way, and it makes so much sense. I think I imagine that most of us who are here who are interpreter trainers, that's how we like to be called, right? And in my language, Portuguese, we can say treinamento, which is another one translation for training, but we like to use formação because training is not just about practicing, but it's about actually training someone. And it's exactly what you said. That's why we like to be called trainers. I love that. Thank you. So, our next speaker is Amanda Forsyth, who will talk about the duration of the courses. How long should a course be?
Hello. Thank you so much. And it's wonderful to be here with all of you and to be sharing this platform with some amazing trainers. So I'm going to be speaking to you today about course duration. And there are a number of schools and universities that offer short courses in interpretation. Very often it is a few weeks at the end of a translation degree. And without getting into the debate about whether translators can be interpreters and interpreters can be translators, I'm going to give you a few reasons why AIIC and the top interpreting schools in the world advise a minimum of 1 to 2 years training in interpretation. So first of all, I'm going to break it down into a few categories, the first of which is technique. So Killian has already mentioned the fact that we need to build skills and improve efficiency and effectiveness of interpretation. But what does that mean? So first of all, interpretation is, as any interpreter will tell you, a very complex and unnatural process, actually, and it can't be learned overnight. And what do I mean by unnatural? It means that, like Jibola said, it takes much more than being bilingual. But interpreters need to learn to be able to listen and speak at the same time, but they're not just listening to the speaker, they're listening to two conversations at a time, or two channels, as we say, because they have to listen to the speaker and themselves to ensure that they have good delivery. And this kind of aptitude or ability is not something that we do on a daily basis. There may be a few exceptions, but it's not normally something that we humans do. And so it is a skill that we need to acquire, or rather several skills involved in that process. So that brings me to the next point that I wanted to make, and that is the pedagogical reasons for having a course. So the technique cannot be learned overnight, but there are many, many other aspects that are part of an interpreting training course. So first of all, you need to lay the groundwork. So you've got the technique, and then you've got general or domain specific knowledge, and that can be taught in class. Very often interpreting schools will offer courses in finance and economics, in international politics, or the politics of the region. Like, for example, if the school is in Europe, a lot of focus will be given to the European Union, or if the school is in Africa, the African Union, the different regions, how they work, what are their institutions, those kinds of things. Interpreters also need to learn conference and field preparation. So, as you may know, we've got conference interpreters, but we also have interpreters in many different fields, like the medical field, court interpreting, in war zones, interpreters for asylum seekers, etc. And so, to be job ready, you need to know what is the etiquette, how you behave, what are the ethical considerations that you need to take into account. And also in the groundwork, we will work on things like language enhancement and register. Killian mentioned, and Jibola as well, that interpreting students, when they come into the school, are expected to have their languages already, because as any interpreting school will tell you, we're not a language school, we are an interpreting school. And you have so much to learn in terms of interpretation that if you don't have the languages to begin with, it makes things very difficult, and sometimes for certain people impossible to reach the target in the set time of a year or 2 years. In terms of the technique, I've spoken about listening and speaking at the same time, in simultaneous, and also listening to the two channels, yourself and the speaker. But in terms of consecutive and simultaneous, there are techniques to be learned in terms of speech analysis, memory techniques, and also delivery, how to be a good speaker yourself as an interpreter. Together with the groundwork and the technique, during the training process, the teacher is going to take the students through different levels where they're going to be confronted, once they've learned the technique, by different problem triggers. And what do I mean by problem triggers? These are things that students are potentially going to struggle with. They are going to have to learn to cope with as interpreters, like transcodables, which is internal trainer jargon for names, dates, and numbers. They're going to struggle with speed, which needs to be increased slowly but surely throughout their training. different accents, speeches that are dense, so very often those that are read. And you've got to take your students through these gradually, and they need time to be able to learn and to practice. Very important is the practice part. I think Killian mentioned that there are things that can be taught by trainers, and then there are things that are learnt by the students. And most of that learning takes place by trying things out and by practicing a lot. In fact, most training courses will advise students that they should be doing as much deliberate practice as the hours of class that they attend, uh, probably more than that. So that all takes a lot of time. And then the next category or item that I wanted to talk about is the order that you teach simultaneous and consecutive. Myrna's going to go into a lot more detail about this. But the reason why I'm bringing it up here is that there are different schools of thought in terms of whether you should teach consecutive first and simultaneous later. I think a vast majority of schools agree that consec comes first and then simultaneous, but some schools will teach them together, or there may be some overlap between consecutive and simultaneous. Regardless of the order, there are different skills that are involved in consecutive and simultaneous. Obviously, there are some skills that overlap, but because of the differences, combining the two can sometimes impact the quality of interpretation in one or both of the modes, consecutive and simultaneous. And this can sometimes lead to a slight regression when you introduce a new mode, and the student will require some time to be able to adjust to the new mode and make corrections in the other mode if necessary. Lastly, I want to talk about pace. So students are individuals and all individuals are different. Therefore, students are going to learn and progress at a different pace. Some students you will find will take to interpretation like a duck to water. You may have students who come into an interpreting school who are bilingual, who come from a bilingual family, and who have, because of that bilingual family, been interpreting since they were young. So all they need is to learn a few of the techniques and they fly. But for others, it'll take a lot longer. And the progress or learning trajectory is never a smooth upward curve. For a lot of students, there are lots of hills and valleys. The slight regression that I spoke about sometimes when a new mode is introduced, or you can have slight regressions when you introduce different problem triggers like new accents or red dense speeches, or names, dates, and numbers. So, and depending on your perspective, I mean, for some people, it's not hills and valleys, but, you know, a 3-year-old's scribble all over the place. But that needs to be taken into consideration. And obviously, there are time limits. If your course is a year or 2 years, the student has to reach that the required level by that time, or they will not pass and get the degree. But we believe that allowing for a year to 2 years should be sufficient based on the acceptance, the testing once students enter the school. That is a very important part of that process, is understanding or assessing whether you believe that that person will be able to reach the required level in the amount of time that they have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And as I was, listening to you speak, I thought, how long it actually takes to, to train an interpreter, right? Because this is a question that many people, those of us who are interpreters know, and those of us who are interpreter trainers know, but many people just don't consider how important that is, and how it's not just something that you learn over, a weekend or by reading books, or there's this whole process that entails so much. And thank you so much for
Thank
explaining that
you.
so well.
I just wanted to say that Killian mentioned the famous déclic in French, when everything is supposed to just click in place. And I remember from my student days where everybody was talking about this déclic, and I was thinking to myself, when is this going to happen for me? It just wasn't happening
Yes.
until much later on. And so I can fully understand how some students feel when it doesn't happen as fast as you would like it to.
Exactly,
Uh,
exactly. And it's not just uphill, right? There's so many moments, as you said, that things go up and then they go down, and then you come home from class and you feel like it was a disaster. You will never be able to interpret again, and then you develop those skills that you need, and you're ready for the next step. Thank you so much.
Part of being a good teacher also is reassuring the students when those regressions happen,
Yes.
and particularly when it's a normal process, and just
Mm-hmm.
saying, hang in there, this is normal, and you will get through it.
Yes,
So thanks so
excellent.
much.
Thank you. So now we are going to hear from Maha El Metwali about postgraduate level qualification. Why is that important? Thank you so much, Maha.
Thank you, Denise. Hello, everyone. It is very nice to be here with this great group of trainers. And before I start, I would like to thank the colleagues who are giving me a voice in Portuguese, Spanish, and in Russian. So thank you in advance. I hope and try to be a good speaker. I'm going to talk about why the interpreter degrees need to be postgraduate level. So I will first start by sharing my screen because I have prepared a couple of slides. So let me then do that first before I start talking. So here it is. So what I would like to start with, there are different reasons, of course, there are many reasons why the postgraduate level qualifications are key. The first one that I could think of is the very starting point, the rigorous assessment. So before any interpreter candidate is admitted into a program to study interpreting, they go through a rigorous entrance exam. As Kilian said, do they have the bricks to build the wall? So the entrance exam makes sure that they have what it takes to become interpreters. And after going through the training, there is the final performance assessment. So this is a way to test if they have learned the components of being an interpreter, and if their performance mirrors the professional expectations, because of course the programs aim to uh, graduate people who are booth ready, who are able to join the profession. So this can happen very, let's say, thoroughly in a postgraduate level program. The second reason is, or the second criteria is, when interpreters join an interpreting program at a postgraduate level, many of these have connections with professional networks or international organizations. If you think, for instance, of the European Masters in Conference Interpreting, MC, this is a group of 15 universities in Europe, and they all offer masters in conference interpreting, and they all offer their students the opportunity to visit the European institutions and to have dummy booth experience there. So that is a very important experience for the students to have a flavor of what it is like to be a professional interpreter. They can then see how these institutions work. They visit the booths. They even get to work in the booths, in a dummy booth, and to meet colleagues. So this is something that is very important and valuable, the connection between the programs and where these interpreters hopefully will get to work after they graduate. Then the mentoring opportunities. Many of the programs that teach conference interpreting at a postgraduate level, they have practicing interpreters as tutors or as teachers. And that is a valuable opportunity for the students to be able to seek advice and maybe be mentored by these teachers. They can then ask questions. They can learn from maybe stories or anecdotes or experiences that their teachers share from the perspective of a practitioner. So mentoring opportunities, they are of course a big plus when a student is enrolled in such a program. And of course, there are the professional standards and ethics. In the profession of interpreters, it has very, very strict codes and ethical standards. And these are taught and emphasized in postgraduate programs. So the students are not only learning how to become interpreters or the skills and sub skills of being an interpreter, but also the ethics, the standards, as Jibola was saying, it is important to have in part of the program dedicated to things like becoming a professional interpreter. What does that entail? So that is something that the students can get through their contact with their professors and their tutors at the postgraduate level. So there is more, but that is what I could think of for now. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Maha. Excellent. And this is exactly what we should be thinking about when we consider all these different how all the criteria come together, right? And the aspect of a postgraduate program is related to all the other topics that were mentioned prior to you and the other ones that will be mentioned later on, and the fact that they all fit together a lot better in a postgraduate level. So thank you very much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Excellent. So, our next speaker is Mirna Soares, and she's going to talk about training in consecutive and simultaneous. And why is that important? Thank you so much, Mirna.
Hello, everyone. Yes, we're going to have another example of how all these criteria work together because I think I'm going to dovetail into everything that was said before. A lot of other colleagues here have already mentioned some aspects that I am going to now organize into this one question, which is why is it important for interpreting programs to train students in both simultaneous and consecutive, right? And especially if they want to be in the directory. We're here in this event hosted by AIIC, and we are an association of conference interpreters. So we have to consider what conference interpreting is. And conference interpreting has two modes. It's consecutive and simultaneous. And of course, we can think of other ways to uh, subdivide these modes, but essentially that's the core, right? And we share these modes with other uh, interpreters as well. But we also have a very specific way of working that is different than a court interpreter or a community interpreter. And so some we have to look at mainly two key reasons to do this, to train the interpreters, and some of them have been mentioned before. The first one is job readiness. The training programs, their goal is to prepare a student who will then leave and go into the job market. And then this interpreter will be working with consecutive simultaneous. And I know that simultaneous is dominant nowadays, and but we still have a lot of consec depending on where you end up. You will have to do it. And here I can mention specifically, for example, and I'll get into that later. But there's because there are two main reasons. One would be the job market, and the other one, how it makes sense to work with these two modes also when you are developing the curriculum and you're working in a course. So let's go into the job market aspect first. We've heard today about the accreditation tests. I mean, this is super important because a lot of big employers will require consec and simultaneous. And we can think of EU institutions, the UN, and also in my context here, the State Department, which requires a consecutive exam, a high level one. And depending on the assignments you get, some interpreters end up working with consecutive a lot, long consec too. So you have to at least have the foundation that will come from your training course so that you will be ready for these jobs, right? And this is an area where specifically diplomatic interpreting, which is generally considered to be in the conference interpreting world, uh, consecutive is very much necessary still, even if simultaneous is dominant. And so now that we've considered this job market part, we can talk about how it's important also as to work with both because they help build skills. We heard here today, Amanda talked about this a little bit. These two modes, they feed off each other. They're not similar when you look at them. They're not, but they do have things in common. They have skills that might overlap a bit or might be a bit different, but by developing one, you can also work on the other one in some ways. And I don't think we're here to say how a course, a training course, should develop their curriculum, but it is very common to see consecutive coming first. And that's because, as was mentioned before, it might seem like a more natural way to interpret for many students because they come from um, an immigrant family or they have this experience being bilingual in settings where they are asked to interpret. And they have an idea because they've done consecutive or an approximation, something similar to that before. And it's more natural to hear something and then not have that time constraint that simultaneous will give you. And so there's this familiarity that makes it very interesting to work with consecutive first. And then you can work with students so that they're going to develop their active listening, their analytical skills, so they really understand the speaker, they follow the red thread, and that is something that will be useful later when they are working with something that is even more complex and more challenging for them, which is simultaneous. Also, the aspect which is delivery and public speaking skills, like how students uh, I mean, in the booth, sometimes they might just forget that they are communicating, that they have an audience, that they have to care about how people are hearing them, right? So um, these skills, they can be developed in consecutive, and then, of course, consecutive is going to have different submodes too. You have short, long, without notes, with notes. And actually, consecutive with notes is already introducing a little bit of multitasking, though different than what happens with simultaneous. But while you take notes, you listen, and then you're going to have to manage that while you're also interpreting and reading your notes. And all this, again, the training program can decide how they're going to introduce these issues. I personally think it makes sense to start with consecutive, but regardless, they will have to see how they complement each other. And then in the end, you will have a student that has experienced the full range of the modes that will be necessary for this professional life. So just wrapping up, we have two modes, essentially, two core modes. They have to be trained, and we have two reasons to do that. One of them is more connected to the job market and the needs there. And the other one would be because it makes sense also in sequencing and preparing the student and how the skills interact in the training program. And I will be around to answer questions later if anyone has them.
Thank you so much, Mirna. And yes, both modes are essential, right? Because that's our profession. And as you said, it's conference interpreting. Something that bothers me personally, but maybe it's just a personal issue, is that some people will say, for example, I'm a simultaneous interpreter or I'm a consecutive interpreter. But in my mind, exactly as you said, we're conference interpreters and we have to work in these two modes. And that's why it's so important for programs to offer both. And that's what we believe in. Thank you so much, Mirna. So now to conclude our panel. So if you've arrived later on after we had started, we are hearing from all of our panel members before. And then we're going to have a Q&A session. We're just about to hear our last panel member, who's Jillian Meissner. Jillian is going to talk about why interpreting practice should be unpaid for students. Thank you so much, Jillian.
Thank you very much, Denise. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We want to start the Q&A session shortly, so I will keep this very brief. As to the criterion why interpreting practice should be unremunerated, I think the reasons are quite clear. Number one, if the students who are doing internships have not yet graduated, so they have not yet proven their professional interpreting proficiency by way of their final exams, and therefore they are not professional interpreters and should not be paid as such. The other reason, ethically speaking, is that if they are accepting paid work, then they are depriving professional interpreters of remunerated paid assignments. I think that some of us have overseen internships because these interns, these student interpreters should not go to assignments or mock conferences without some kind of professional mentoring. And so, so I think that, they may accept tokens of appreciation. Sometimes the client will, I've seen them bring flowers, or they offer to, share the food, share the meal with the interpreters. But otherwise, I think unremunerated work when you have not graduated from your interpreting program is something that is quite clear and speaks for itself. And before I wrap up, I would just like to thank today's interpreters. And I would also like to mention that we on this panel are all graduates of the Masters of Advanced Studies in Interpreter Training. And there are other such graduates present. So I'm just going to read out their names: Andrew, Raluca, Chris, Danai, Hilda, Leo, Danielle, and Eke. And I would also like to give a shout out to some trainers who have inspired me, who I look up to, and who are not mass graduates, because we know that worldwide there are many excellent interpreter trainers who don't have this degree. And they are Ekaterina, Julia, Ahmed, Laura, Viviana, Giuseppe, Daniele, Aude Valérie, Lisette, Chongjun, Denise, and Michelle. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jillian. Thank you. Yes, this is something that I wanted to have mentioned in the beginning when we talked about this, that we know, and I'm an example of that. Not all of us are able to uh, study at specific interpreter trainers programs, but we as ATPD have been for many years, decades even, offering training of trainers and other opportunities to help trainers like myself and other trainers who are here and who were mentioned that haven't had the opportunity to do that training. So now, without further ado, our great tech host Michelle, who's also an interpreter trainer, as Jillian said, is going to spotlight all of the panel members on the screen. And we would like you, if you would have a question, we would like you to raise your hand, please, and I will do my best to call out the ones who have their hands raised. So for if you have a comment, we'd also like to hear it, but we would like to maybe do questions first, but that's okay. If your question also comes with a comment, that's fine. So we do have a question from Celine. Gerbert, Celine, can you start your mic and send us your question? Yes, wonderful.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much to all the speakers and for organizing this seminar. It's been very, very interesting and informative. And thank you as well to the interpreters for their work during the seminar. Briefly, I am myself a conference interpreter, AIIC, and I've been a CI trainer for just over 10 years. I am now a PhD researcher at the University of Exeter School of Education. And my question relates to the language component of conference interpreting, which has been referred to by several of our speakers. So my question is mainly directed at Killian Sieber and Amanda Forsyth, who mentioned language specifically, but also Jibula Solofan, because she also referred to it, but to any of the speakers if they would like to answer. So my question, could you, both the two speakers I referred to directly or any of the other speakers, define what you understand as having the languages to begin conference interpreting? That's the first question. The second question is, not everybody, but I've understood that there is an implied assumption about how languages are taught at university. If, therefore, you could influence undergraduate language education, this is my field of research, undergraduate language education in particular, what would you like language education at undergraduate level to focus on in order to create a stronger base for potential translators or interpreters? Those are my two questions.
Killian, you can start. Thank you. And then Amanda and whoever would like to chime in. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks, Celine, for the question. I think it's an interesting question. Good luck on that PhD of yours. The language component, yes, as I was saying, it has a declarative, a what component, but also a procedural component, a how component. And the question was a bit of a provocative question. What do you understand as having a language? And make no mistake, I think I don't want to say no year goes by, but this regularly comes back, and we sit down as pedagogical groups within training programs to see how do we define this having a language. I think there are two ways of looking at it. On one hand, there's a normative approach or the descriptive approach, and then there's the operational approach. Do you have a particular proficiency in a language? And that can be tested for, I would say, lower to relatively advanced levels with standardized tests. And then, the European framework that exists, and there are lots of tests that are offered by different outfits, the Cervantes Institute and the Goethe Institute and the Alliance Française and so on and so forth, and they can test your proficiency in a language. Now, how do we bring that back to interpreting and what it means having a language for interpreting purposes? In the past, schools were very strict in the language portfolio they offered. and everybody was shoved into a mold. It was an ABC mold. That's traditionally how schools evolved. You had, and I think most people on the call probably know what the ABC stands for in AIIC nomenclature. Everybody had to have an A language and a B language and a C language. And the approach was very operational. By virtue of doing it, I have that language as an A language, as a B language, and as a C language. We have moved away from that, or we have been moving away from that. And now the languages on offer are much more, the language combinations on offer are much more flexible. There are programs allowing in students with AA, AB, ABC, ACC, the whole gamut, which doesn't necessarily make it easier for us to ascertain whether a particular language is good enough, right? So what is important, and that's something, and I was going to give you a little spoiler alert. I'm not going to give you a definitive, exhaustive, perhaps not even a satisfactory answer to your question. What is important is to keep in mind what the training program can do. The training program will, in most cases, not be able to up your language proficiency significantly. What it can do is polish it. Of course, in the course of an interpreter training program, I would expect all students to improve their language proficiency in terms of becoming more verbally fluent, for example. You know the concept of verbal fluency if you're doing a PhD on education having to do with languages. I would expect them to increase both their depth and their breadth of their language proficiency. But I will not be able to take a language of which they have mediocre understanding to becoming a language they can interpret into. Those bricks will not just appear out of thin air. Now, when it comes to the actual level, I think every so often the contention when we talk about it internally is, well, what is that level? And there is no such that. AIIC has its definition. It's your mother tongue or a strict equivalent. So it can be a language that you have either you have acquired it or you have learned it, but then you have been exposed to that language for a long time. And I have a background whisper, and I don't know, somebody must have turned on their mic. Maybe they disagree. And there is a range, I think, of what is acceptable. And you will know this. You say you've been training interpreters. You're a member of AIIC. You've been sitting in the booth with colleagues, and I would argue that not everybody is within a very narrow range of language proficiency. You might have worked with some people of whom you think, boy, anything they say could be printed as it comes out of their mouth. And others that struggle a little more, but the baseline is still there. So it is really difficult. I mean, and attempts have been made to classify it and say it has to be a C2 or above to be an A or a B or a C, and that really depends on the school. But I think it is relatively easy for an A language. It is relatively easy for a C language. And it's really, really difficult for this animal we call a B language. But most people can agree on what it entails or what it means or what it sounds like for it to be an A. Most people agree that if they're bits that are not understood, it's not a C, not according to AIIC. AIIC tells us that you have to have complete understanding. If upon exposure to a written or an oral text, discourse, there are bits missing because you don't understand, by definition, that wouldn't be a C. Now, then it's up to the panel to decide, are these potholes so big that they can't be made up within the training program's duration, or can they? So it's a bit of a, I know I'm skirting the issue. It's a bit of a non-answer, but that's as good as I can answer it, I think, from my vantage point.
Thank you so much, Killian. Amanda, do you have anything to add? Because we have other questions, and I'm just wondering if.
Yeah, I was going to say, thanks for making me go after Killian, because what do you have to say after Killian? No, I do have, being the big mouth that I am, I do have a couple of things to add. Just to respond to the second question about how undergrad programs can help to prepare interpreters interpreting students for interpreting school. In most language programs in undergrad, the focus is a lot on literature. And I think that by the introduction of current affairs, international affairs, and learning the languages in the context of what is happening in the world, I think that would prepare students rather well for what they're going to experience in interpreting training and in conferences. That said, when you get to interpreting school, even if you have done very, very well in your languages in undergrad, conference language, as all interpreters will tell you, is a whole different ball game. It has its own jargon that needs to be learned. There are also important differences between the registers that are used, and as an interpreter you need to know to use the appropriate register. So speaking from my own experience, when I first went to interpreting school, I felt that I could speak French pretty well, and discovered when I was in interpreting school and going through the classes on finance and economics and politics and things like that, I had a little column in the left-hand side of my notebook where I planned to write the odd word or expression that was new. And in the end, I had to completely swap over my columns because everything was new. I was writing tons and tons of this new strange vocab in either conference jargon or in the jargon of those particular fields, and in the type of register that we needed to use in conference interpreting. And then also, from my own experience, when I went into interpreting school, my B was not strong enough. I have a French B, which thankfully today is a lot stronger, but at the time it wasn't strong enough. And I know from personal experience what a battle it is for interpreting students who are not only battling to learn the techniques and the different skills involved, like learning how to memorize things and to analyze the speech and to listen to two channels at the same time. And then on top of that, to still have to struggle with grammar and vocab and are you using the right register and stuff like that. It's not impossible. It just means that you need more time. But as Killian mentioned, we have time limits. You've either got a year or 2 years to do this in, and that is why your languages need to be very, very solid before you start. One last thing that I wanted to mention is also the thing that the interpreting schools need to check for is that you don't have language pollution. You can have students that come into a school with 3 or more languages that they are supposedly fluent in, only for them and their trainers to discover later on that there is language pollution, or that the students is so used to speaking multiple languages that they don't have a mother tongue, or that they cannot speak any of the languages in a pure fashion. So that too is very important and can lead to being quite a serious challenge when you are learning interpretation and trying to fix those language problems at the same time.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you, Celine, for your question. We're going to have to try to keep the questions and the answers a bit short, because or else we won't have enough time. And we do have some links to share with you, so please don't leave before we actually finish. And we have a special guest who will also speak. So please, please, please bear with us. Please, Ibrahim, your question.
Okay, thank you for giving me the floor. I'd like first of all to commend the presentations made by the presenters. My name is Ibrahim Saleh Bare, a professional conference interpreter trained at Advanced School of Translators and Interpreters based in Cameroon, ASTI. Okay, so My first question goes to Kilian, the first presenter. From the presentation, I understood that AIIC has some accreditation. AIIC is playing the role of accreditors. So, what is AIIC doing to oblige the school to respect the criteria that AIIC is working on? That's my first question. I don't know, should I continue with the remaining
Ibrahim, actually,
presenters?
excuse me, sorry. I will actually answer that question on behalf of AIIC Training and Professional Development. But we
Okay.
actually, we have other 4 people to ask questions. And so I'd really like to ask you to maybe choose which questions you'd like to ask, because if you ask many questions, we just won't have the time. Is that okay,
Okay,
please?
okay.
Okay,
Okay,
so I can
sorry.
answer your question very briefly, your first question. So AIIC does not accredit programs, no programs whatsoever. In the past, this used to happen. Now, what we do, and I will give you the link so that schools can also apply, we have the schools directory, which is a list of the schools that meet the 6 criteria that were mentioned by all of our panel members, and a 7th criteria, which is actually the fact that the course has to run for a full year before they apply for the directory. Okay, but we don't accredit these schools. And so we trust that the universities that will answer the questions are speaking the truth, but AIIC does not go and inspect the programs or anything like that.
Okay.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to clarify. Your next question.
All right. Thank you very much for the answer. Now, we all agree that interpreting program or conference interpreting program is all about position the skills that include interpretation techniques. But in most of the school, or let me say in Africa, at the second year, there's a thesis in the curriculum, a thesis that may take for some people beyond 2 to 3 years before they defend it. So I don't really, from my own perspective, I don't really see the importance of that thesis taking more than even the years that are dedicated for the main program. Because in most of the advanced schools, the program is dedicated for, is a 2 years program. But sometimes you see that some people right now, from my own batch, there are some people that are yet to defend their thesis. Meanwhile, we all agree that interpreting profession is all about practice, skills, and techniques. So those people, even if they have gotten some opportunity to go and seize, because they have not yet defended, they can't be able to do it. And we all agree that the trainers themselves, some, even if they are staff interpreters, they also do freelancing. So they are not that available really to supervise the trainees in order for them to conclude their program. I don't really know if there's some perspective that can be really deployed about this particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Who would like to address that, please, from our panel? I don't know. Jibala, yes, please. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Ibrahim, for that question. Quickly, the scenario you've described seems to me like the scenario of a school where training is being given by academics rather than professionals. And that is exactly the point that the directory is making when it says that training should be dispensed by professionals. Where training is given by professionals, they stand a chance of influencing the curriculum. At the university where I trained, University of Ghana, the trainers influenced the term papers and the memoirs and made sure that they were on topics that dealt with conference interpreting, and very often the practice of it. And never did anyone take 3-4 years to finish. So I think that that is a specific reality of the school that you are referring to. But here's the thing, if this comes up in the AIIC, if the school tries to be on the AIIC schools register, the likelihood is that if this kind of information comes up, it just might not get on the register. So for me, this just speaks to, again, to the importance of having professionals training, one, and two, influencing the curriculum development to avoid this kind of situation. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ibrahim, I'm sorry. Now we need to give the floor to other people who have questions, okay? We do have still 4 people in line.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
And
Sophia.
just to clarify to all, in our in the questions in the questionnaire to be a part of the directory, there is a question about having a thesis, but it is not a mandatory criteria. We know that many of the postgraduate programs do have this requirement of a thesis or a final paper, but it's not something that will make a course be or not in the directory because we do know that programs have different requirements in them. Okay, so Shongjung Liao, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Denise, for the opportunity, and thank you, Jillian, for mentioning my name. I'm quite flattered. I'm Chongjun. I'm a conference interpreter in China, AIIC pre-candidate, and I'm also a trainer of interpreting at Sichuan International Studies University, and my university has been recently listed on the school's directory, which I'm quite happy. So as I'm also a researcher, so my question is about, could any of the panelists comment on the role or the potential role of theory or theoretical modules in conference interpreter training, and how they could possibly contribute to the development of the practical skills of interpreters? Thank you.
So would anyone like to take that one? Killian, yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
I have a one-liner, I think, well, a two-liner. Somebody very famous, I'm not going to ascribe the quote, once said, practice without theory is mere child play, and theory, no, is blind, and theory without practice is mere child play. So I think you need both. You need to enmesh the two, and I think we've gone beyond thinking that you can only do the thing without thoroughly understanding what it is you're doing. That's all I'm going to say about it. So I think there is value.
Yes,
Can I
definitely.
can I quickly follow up?
Uh-huh.
So Killian, thank you for that answer. I mean, the reason that I asked, because I think you just mentioned there's the declarative aspect of knowledge, which is about what, and also procedural, which is about how, but how about why? I mean, should we equip students with this kind of analytical skills if they embark on their own professional journey? I mean, if they do possess some kind of analytical skills, which is based on certain theory, so that can sustain their professional development, in my opinion. So, I mean, but specifically speaking, there are so many theories available out there. So would you perhaps recommend some specific aspects of theory that we can teach to our students at postgraduate level? Thank you.
So, Xianglu, let me just jump in there since we don't have a lot
Sorry,
of
is
time.
it
What? No,
okay?
it's fine.
My
It's just that
apologies.
no, it's not your fault. It's because we don't want to keep all the participants for longer than the
Understood.
1 hour and 30 minutes that we have asked. But I
Right.
do want to say that one link that I'll be sharing with you in the end, and you can find it in the AIIC website, is that apart from these 7 eliminatory criteria, we do have a list of about 23 other criteria that are desirable but not necessarily eliminatory. And one of them is that the curriculum should include a theory component and also courses that address professional practice and ethics. And so we don't, of course, I imagine that Killian and the other trainers would have many recommendations for you. But now we just unfortunately don't have the time to go into that. Okay.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions. Ahmed, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you to all the presenters. Excellent presentations. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces. Hello. My question is very brief. So far, you've talked about languages and language skills, language acquisition and technique. One of the things that seems to be missing, in my humble opinion, in interpreter training is empathy. The psychological impact of feedback, for example, when you provide feedback to somebody who's struggling with their A language or B language, especially when we use words or expressions such as mother tongue or culture, language of culture. And in the early stages of interpreting, somebody shows up at a program, they do the aptitude testing, they prove to have the potential, and yet they struggle with feedback when they hear, well, your language is not right, your language skills are not enough, your understanding, your analytical skills. So I'm just curious if any of the seasoned trainers that you are have given any consideration to the psychological impact of feedback and how to provide it best, and also just empathy, especially in this age where AI is a fashionable thing. What about the human side of it? Thank you very much.
Jillian, can you address that question? Can I ask you to do that? Sorry, Amanda.
Okay, I was going to turn it over to Amanda because I mean, I couldn't agree more, Ahmed, as you know, and you were a very empathetic trainer. I think that's one of your strengths. And I think the best trainers are empathetic, and you need to be empathetic to a certain point, obviously. But Denise, may I turn it over to Amanda very quickly?
Sure, that's fine. Sure.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Very briefly, first of all, wonderful to see you and to chat with you online. Yeah, there is a very, very distinct way of providing feedback to students and providing feedback to colleagues, whether they are trainers or fellow interpreters. And this is exactly why we need pedagogues to provide training as well as industry professionals, because sometimes you can have an expert in the field who is an interpreting genius and doesn't quite understand why that particular colleague or that particular student just doesn't get it. And so it does require empathy. You do have to put yourself in the shoes of the person and take their context into consideration so that you are able to deliver that feedback in a way that, one, they can hear it, and two, in a way that is useful to them that they can then action. So telling somebody that they've made a mistake or that they left something out is one thing, but telling them what to do about it, and also potentially that it's not just them, but other people, or that you yourself have experienced it, is another thing. So I've done a whole training on feedback, so I could speak for hours, but I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Excellent. Yes, and we have a training in Bangkok next week with Andy Gillies about feedback as well, a training of trainers. So for those of you who are interested, I think we still have 1 or 2 spots left in that training. Annie, please.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much to all the speakers. Ahmed just mentioned AI, and this is the question I wanted to ask. I don't expect you to answer this very specific questions now, but it's a bit the elephant in the profession nowadays. So I was wondering how you think about introducing a training to the use of AI for the new interpreters, and also how AI will help you in training as well. I just wanted to put this question on the table because we've been discussing all the traditional ways of training, which is perfectly fine, and I totally agree with everything. But I think we need to enter this new era, and we need to think about that very seriously. Thank you.
Very good. Maha, please, can you answer that one?
Thank you very much for your question, Annie. Good to see you again. I give training to students and to practicing interpreters about technology for interpreters. And my, let's say, point of reference is I do not see technology or AI as a threat. I see it more as something that can complement our performance, our preparation, to make our life a bit easier. So I always start by saying to the trainees, imagine if you have the human and you give them the power of the machine. Are we going then to create a centaur, a mythical creature, somebody with more abilities? So that is my point of view. What I try to do is to look at what kind of tools are useful. I try them, I test them, and if they prove to be useful, then I teach them to trainees or to students, because not all tools are good. So I ask them then to explore, look at the different tools around them, and to try and see which tools are hyped up and which tools are useful, but not to fear that these tools are going to be taking over. I have maybe a bit of a more positive outlook when it comes to technology. I try to ask them to, okay, look at this tool. Is it something that could be useful for you? Then explore a bit more, and I give them choices of different tools in glossary management, for instance, or annotating documents, or summarizing things, make them aware of maybe some things that they need to be aware of when it comes to what can be used confidentially and what not, what can maintain the confidentiality of the documents and what not. So that's what I do. But the main message is, don't be afraid of technology. It can be useful to speed up some of the processes that you do as an interpreter.
Thank you so much, Maha. Thank you for your question, Annie. We could talk about this topic for days, actually, each of us here. But we also wanted to, as you were asking your question and as Maha was answering, it came to mind that we as ATPD have been trying to also offer different training opportunities that are related to AI, AI-powered interpreting, and other technology in the curriculum and all those things. And also on the 31st of May, we are going to have a event that is being promoted by the Arab region and the Science Hub and ATPD. This is an event for AIIC members, so those of you who are members will be able to join. You can register on the AIIC events page, and we will talk about this, the use of technology, but more importantly, about what is important for us as humans to consider about our human role in using this technology. And also, it's also a great opportunity. Jurgen, please. We can't hear you. Can you please unmute? Thank you.
Okay, good enough. Good morning to everybody. Thanks so much for organizing this very useful seminar. I'm from the Mexico, Central America, Caribbean region, and I'd like to bring up a specific point. I feel that there's a lot coming from interpretation programs. Those who might publish or do masters, or whose students do master's thesis in European languages are of particular interest. So I wonder if anything is being done to see, or to really to capture this fresh insight, because students at a master's degree level aren't academically prepared, and they could give so much to those of us who live in other parts of the world where most of the professors do not publish, do not go to professional meetings, etc. I don't know if there's any kind of a league or a group of, say, ex-graduates. If someone could shed light on that, and how we, those of us who live in areas where it's harder to publish, could have access, because I think this would really, really be valuable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jurgen. So I don't know if someone else, if someone would like to comment on that. I don't have a specific answer to your question, but as you were speaking, I thought that a great place to start, but not in starting to publish, but actually to see different things being published about interpreters and about interpreter training and interpreting research is the Serin Bulletin that is organized by Professor Daniel Gilles. And so that has, so Professor Gilles has a bunch of different other professors in different areas of the world, and he includes many of these publications in his bulletin that are not necessarily in European languages. And so that would be a great opportunity. But this idea of a network, as you said, I'm not aware of any effort like that. I don't know if my other colleagues in the panel are. If anyone would like to jump in.
I'm aware of Danielle's marvelous efforts. I'm the node for Mexico, so I'm up on that.
Oh,
And
wonderful. Yeah.
it includes a lot of journalists saying, how can I get access to this? They're not in the libraries. But if somehow we could share this information, which all of you are doing is, just so marvelous. It would be such great benefit, this fresh insight, this, new, they're well prepared, but they've still got to, find their way through. And I think to pool knowledge would be very interesting. Thank you.
Yes, very good.
Denise,
Yes,
could I
Jillian?
jump in just very quickly?
Of course.
Yeah, Georgianne, I'm sure you know Hilda Tejada in your
Yeah,
region.
she's
So
true.
she's
Yeah.
So she's a graduate of the Mats as well, and she would have lots of insights for you. She can recommend publications and that sort of thing. So perhaps look
that's
to her.
how I know about it. Yeah, we're very close
yeah.
friends and colleagues. And
okay.
she
That's just
well,
tonight.
I won't upstage her, let her tell you about her work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. So thank you all for this panel. This discussion has been wonderful. I'm so grateful to all the panel members. Before we conclude and give our little, the other thank yous, we are so honored by the presence of our AIIC president here at the meeting, Silvia Amici. And so we'd like to give her the floor to greet our colleagues who are here at this meeting. So Sylvia, if you would like to start your video and unmute, we're ready to hear from you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, ATPD colleagues and distinguished panelists for that very erudite discussion on training, as well as on the criteria, the 7 criteria for the listing in the AIIC directory. Training is really important. Interpreter training, continuous professional development are things that are at the core of AIIC. Training has made us who we are today as interpreters and language mediators, and it will continue being of extreme importance. So I'm glad that you're having this discussion on training, talking openly, frankly, about training, and I hope that you'll have many more sessions. Regarding Annie's intervention on AI, we are all anxious about AI, but I believe that language mediation will continue being human-centered. It should continue being human-centered even in the age of AI. And we look forward to the seminar you're having on May 31st, equipping us with tools on how to remain relevant in this age of fast-paced AI innovations. And thank you sincerely once again for excellent interventions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. We're so grateful for EXCO's support and for your presence here. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're most welcome.
So for us to conclude now, I would like to share my screen just with a few thank yous. We're so grateful to you who are here. And especially we'd like to thank our volunteer interpreters who are interpreting this session. We have a Portuguese booth. If you can shout out the names, do you have the names there, Jillian, or whoever has the names, please? I know Daniele Fonseca and Nana Barreiros are in the Portuguese booth. Yes.
And then there's, I think for English, there's Ana Maria, Alexandra, and Lara, if I'm not mistaken.
For Spanish, and for you mean, right?
Spanish, sorry. And for Russian, it's Kirill and Nicola.
Yes. Thank you.
And
thank you so
Suzette
much.
as well for the Spanish booth.
Oh, thank you, Michelle.
Suzette Gonzalez, sorry.
Yes. So these are all the QR codes that we want to share with you. There are 4 of them there. So the first one is, as I said, the longer list of the interpreting the best practice that we consider important for interpreting programs. You'll see there recommendations before the program, during the program, recommendations about exams as well, and you can find that all in that list. For you to create a profile in the schools directory, you can use the second link right below it. To access the schools directory, if you're a student and you're looking for a program, please use this third link to your right. And we also have a list of best practice for internships, which is related to Jillian's topic regarding unremunerated payment, unremunerated assignments, sorry. But there are also other things that need to be taken into consideration for internships. And we also like to thank Jillian Meisner, who was a panel member, but also organized this whole event. She contacted everyone, and she was in charge of, she was the ATPD member in charge of all of this. And we also want to thank Michelle Hoff, who was our tech support for this whole event and allowed us to have everything seamless for these almost 2 hours that we've been together. So thank you all very much. Please follow us on LinkedIn. If you're not following the ATPD page yet, please follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll see you in other events. Have a great rest of your day, evening, and everything. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much for an interesting event.
Thank you.